That was an awesome lesson.
Thank you.
And I enjoyed being back in the classroom. That was fun for me. So I have quickly just tried to code things only looking at domain 3.
Okay.
So if during the next 5 or 6 minutes, we'll talk about mainly focusing on instruction. So what kinds of things did you think coming out of the lesson?
First of all, I felt like I had about half the amount of time that I needed to complete it, so I can carry it over into tomorrow.
Did you feel rushed while you were in the midst of it?
I did not feel rushed in the midst of it. I just knew that I had a lot more to accomplish today than I got to.
Do you think the students sensed that?
Other than me telling them they would have time for their reading, I don't think they sensed it until we got to about 10 minutes before lunch and they knew they hadn't started their pages.
As an observer, I didn't sense it. At first, when you ended the lesson, they initially all pulled out their books because that's normally what they do at the end of the routine. So then I was glad to see you double back to say, hold on, we're not going to do that right now. We'll set aside that time because I wanted you to come back and do the closure, and then you did.
Okay.
So I was glad to see that because I thought, well, maybe she's just going to cut that out because you ran out of time. But you didn't. So I think that was the right instructional choice, was to go back and prioritize. No, we've done the posters. Now we're going to go through the posters. So that felt good. None of it felt rushed in the middle of it, to me.
Right, which is why I feel like I ran out of time, because they were spending so much time on what they were doing, but I felt like they were doing it well, which is why I allowed them to go longer.
Yeah. So what in the evidence would lead you to believe that they were participating, that they were accomplishing the goals that you wanted them to accomplish?
So just the descriptors that they came up with. I was so happy with the things they came up with. I had expected them to be much more basic. And they had multiple precise descriptors for each character. And they were spot on. They fit. And I think when we read them aloud, we could really see the difference between those three characters.
Right.
And also the partners that went around, their descriptors closely matched synonyms, etc., of what other kids had said.
Groups. I wondered when you started the activity if they would spend their time writing or thinking about words based upon what the other kids did. As I walked around and listened to kids, I didn't get any evidence of that. Did you get the sense that they were influenced by the words that the other kids had written?
That was something else I worried about. Okay. Because whenever you're doing this type of activity, and I call this the art gallery, where they go from spot to spot, are they just going to look at somebody else's and copy?
Right.
But like you, the things that I heard them talking about, even if sometimes they couldn't think of a different word and ended up putting the same word, they were still having a discussion.
They were, yeah.
So that
and what I noticed is they almost took the other examples. So if what they were describing was a word that was already on the chart, I found them, and at least two groups, them almost perseverating on, well, we need to think of a different word, even though they're saying, well, he always wants to do things his own way, and somebody already has headstrong or a word on there that is exactly what they're describing, but they were almost stuck on, well, we don't want to use that word because someone else already used it.
Yeah, I was happy about that too.
Yes, and I saw that several times. Was there anything other than just the amount of material to cover in the lesson? Was there anything that didn't go, or anything that concerned you? Didn't go the way you wanted it to?
Everything went the way I wanted. The only thing that concerns me, and I think that this is fine, but I always am worried when I spend time showing them what I expect for their behavior. I always feel like that's not instruction, it's wasting time, but I know it's necessary. And so when I went up to Sammy and I did the quiet voice and the loud voice, I know that makes it more productive. I know that in my head, but when I'm doing it, I feel like I'm wasting time doing this, and sometimes I don't do it because of that.
So I know the coded evidence here is all in domain 3, but if you go back and look at just the transcript of the whole lesson, the amount of time that's dedicated to that is so minimal. So if we were talking about domain 2, that would have been a strength that I brought to the table. Before you released them, you said, what is the appropriate volume in the room? And then this is what that looks like. And I know in middle school we often don't do that, but I think that's a critical step that is often missed. So I wouldn't eliminate that. Even though I understand what you're describing, it feels like we should just be jumping into the meat and potatoes.
It's tempting to eliminate it.
And when I think when you go back and review the whole transcript of the lesson, I think you'll see It's so minimal.
Okay.
It doesn't really take the time that you're thinking it might be taking. And I think probably what it buys you back later
Okay.
in the smoothness of the transitions and of them, they've got right to work, and there
Okay.
were no noise issues at all for the entire time.
And I'm glad
So-
to have an outsider see that
Right.
because it probably feels like longer to me,
Mhm.
and maybe,
Right.
maybe it's not
And you'll
so
have to
bad.
look. I did some timestamps as I went through, but I didn't
Okay.
do them super consistently, so you may or may not be able to actually take a timestamp.
Okay.
So, at the end of the lesson, did you get the result that you wanted?
Yes, because what I wanted was to get them to have a really varied list of descriptors that fit the character so that they would know the character. They got that. Of course, I have the writing activity where we'll expand on that.
Okay.
We didn't get to.
Right.
That
Was
got
originally
more.
that part of the intent was that they would actually get to the writing today?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, moving into tomorrow, what do you carry forward? What do you take out of this lesson that you want to move forward into tomorrow's lesson?
So we'll probably just review the posters that they made. They're up on the wall, and have them remind their partner who they chose and why,
Okay.
and then explain the writing.
Perfect.
Have them do the assessment piece.
Okay.
On their own.
Anything else you had questions about, or things that?
I think just from what you heard, because this is something that I always struggle with when I have them working together. Is anybody riding the coattails of someone else, or is it truly valuable for all? I know when I go to workshops, we went Friday, and when we're working together, it's always super valuable as
Right.
compared to working alone, but I'm not in middle school.
Right.
So,
So there were a few kids that I was specifically looking at, but that helps that I know the population,
right.
and they were engaged. So that was one of the things that I thought, well, I wonder if I could quantify even the amount. But what I found was that several times I was saying every student is engaged in conversation, every student is participating. So I really felt in that regard for this particular lesson, yeah, I mean, you really nailed the ability to make sure that everyone was participating and carrying their own weight.
So then when they go individually and have to do that writing by themselves, I've got both covered, you feel,
Yes,
and,
I think so.
and appropriately.
Yep. I do.
Okay.
I think that everybody should have walked out of the lesson today with enough material to be able to participate appropriately in writing something tomorrow.
Okay.
So it was good.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah. Good job.